Okay, welcome back to InnoFX Live. We're here with Scott and Stacie, both from Elizabeth Carbide Die, an icon in the industry in the area of tablet tooling, and we're going to be talking about leveraging tablet tooling design for product defense and product identification. One of the things I think that people have been doing for many years, long before track and trace and everything else, was that they wanted to make sure that their tablets were unique enough and that the design was unique enough so somebody would not follow down that path along with them. And I think some of that philosophy is held, some of that stuff has changed over the years, so we're gonna do a calibration today and see where we're at. So let me start by asking Stacie, how do you view current challenges facing the solid dosage manufacturer when it relates to product design? What do you see as a challenge there? Yeah, you can start. So ladies first, Stacie, please. Right. Okay, there you go.
Basically, as we see, as you said, a lot of people want a unique tablet. The more unique you get, the cost many times goes up to manufacture that uniqueness, depending on which way you go. So we're trying to keep it cost affordable and yet give you what you need to maintain your distinction amongst others, basically.
And I was going to add, Russ, that I guess if I think, oops, sorry, let me calibrate. Is that okay? As I consider the conversations we're having with our customers, our engagement is changing over time, where traditionally, from a tooling perspective and provider, right, we've commonly been engaged in sort of operational efficiencies and how do we improve life of their tooling, how do we improve production outputs or rates or yields. Those are all sort of classical discussions. But when it comes to brand defense and the product design areas, the global demands that our customers are trying to achieve, in a way they have a noble goal. They're trying to feed an ever-expanding global demand for solid dose, cost effectively, timely, securely, every corner of the world. So it's a very nice challenge, I think. At the same time, they're challenged by increasing fiscal pressures, whether it be consolidation of the buyers in the market, as well as government stricter regulatory and the government need to expand access of quality medicines, right, around the world. And our customers do provide those quality medications that improve quality of life and treatment outcomes. And so these are all good challenges, but as they face those pressures to be efficient and be competitive in the marketplace, our engagements are necessarily shifting a little bit upstream, where they are engaging us with more in-depth questions about, well, how do we brand, how do we produce something that will be unique, or even just our ability to manufacture and manufacture in multiple factories, and of course, competitive edge.
So let me ask you this then. I mean, Stacie, we had a conversation before we started, and invariably they're going to come up with some bright idea. And a lot of times I think the gee whiz, we should change the design is after the fact, the product's already been launched. So they come to you and they say, okay, I want to make this a unique shape, or, there's limitations. So what does a typical conversation like that go? Not everything's going to compress.
Exactly. And we also have to deal with maybe multiple strengths of the same product. So you have to look to make sure that what might work for strength B may not work for strength C as well. So you do look at all of that. We do talk to, right now I'm in the customer service area, so we have to look at the whole picture too, as to what your need is and what your budget is as well. Certainly we can change the design of the tablet. We certainly have to make sure that it is still compressible and that you're going to get the results that you need. As you mentioned, if it is after the fact, a lot of times, and after everything is submitted, a lot of change they don't want to do beyond the size, possibly. Maybe they can't change the size because that's in their documents. Maybe we can change some of the branding on it, the engraving, update that. They have a new logo, so we go into that as well.
So what are some typical ways that tablet tooling can change a product brand, Scott?
Yeah, I guess the most common you might imagine is shape, right? We work with our customers from the most basic or mundane shapes to more exotic shapes and characters and that are just for brand identification or uniqueness. There could be, for example, tablets that have holes. If you think of the classic Lifesaver, you can then, beyond just the functional shape and perspectives, you can go into various combinations of colors and printing on top of the basic tablet. But naturally, we're in a supporting role when it comes to various coatings and printing. And sometimes we're challenged by helping to plan for those different changes in coating or color or printing.
So what sort of things do you help them with, Stacie?
Well, in that case, what Scott was talking about, if for sure they are going to coat it and print it and not have any engraving or embossing on the tablet itself, you have to make sure that the ratio to width to length and thickness is proper so that it does roll nicely in the coating pan. It has the ability to be printed and not be side printed. So those are calculations we have to go through, and that's where we work directly with the customer to understand what they're going to do in the long run with this particular tablet. They may be ordering something that's totally plain, and we would ask those questions. Will it be film coated to make sure that the design won't stick together as well? And then is it going to be printed? How much printing are you going to put on it so we can avoid any side printing or any problems with that as well?
Are the customers even aware that sometimes that these modifications in design will obviate printing, but obviate twinning as a service that you provide simply based on your vast experience?
Definitely, definitely.
It's amazing how people just think it doesn't happen.
Right.
Correct, yeah. There's a lot of science and engineering that goes into a little small tablet.
Oh yeah, don't have to tell me that one.
Yep.
So anyway, let me ask you, what techniques do you use, for example, brand differentiation, all right? I've seen it go a bunch of different ways. There was a time in this industry where it was all the same size, same shape, different color, which used to drive me insane. So I was delivering 25 in a 200 milligram and 100 in a 200 milligrams. So you invariably had other problems. So based on that, I mean, where have the trends gone that you've seen? So obviously we've gone through that. So where is it now? I mean, what type of brand differentiation do you use? Where do you see it? Where does it come up? So we can start with you, Scott. There you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, you still have what you would consider the common shapes and sizes, but as Stacie mentioned, it's different logo definitions. We see certainly with the consolidation in the market, right? We're remaking tablets that have been made for many years, but with new logos, right? Very simply. We're, I guess, having increasing discussions on different bisect techniques, and not only for identification, but also for functional reasons. Those are a couple of areas, and it's a bit of I think just marketing style, right? We often are working with the engineers who are serving a marketing master, and we therefore are trying to make prototype tablets. Although we don't make tablets, we can give them, whether it be 3D models or whether we give them actual physical plastic, so to speak, prototypes that they have to consider from a marketing perspective purely.
So let me ask you this. I mean, Stacie, somebody says, I specifically want to get in a situation where I prevent counterfeiting. Now, understand there's counterfeit drug substance and there's counterfeit drug product.
Sure.
So, okay, let's stick with the drug product, assuming that what's in there is right. So what sort of things do you talk about there?
You can certainly do something with their logo that may only be known to yourself and to them. Shortening part of a letter, making something a little different that would not be normal to maybe the naked eye, but yet the customer could check to make sure that, yes, this is their indeed product. So you can do some things with engraving or embossing that is on the tablet. Now, if it's a printed tablet, that makes things a lot more difficult because we have no control over that. You would have to do something with more of an exotic shape.
Well, let's explore that for a minute. So, I mean, in the past, one of the things that was used, and maybe it's an ancient, one of the ancient things, but what would customarily happen is manufacturers would put tracer elements into their products, so that the answer is if it came back, they knew it was theirs. And this thing was, kept in a jar behind the desk of some guy, and he was the only person that knew what it was. And this actually was a component, but nowadays we're putting stuff into a formulation has to have a rationale. So, on that note, I mean, the key there was I knew it was there, nobody else did unless I had to test it. So in the counterfeiting, so the question really is, as it goes out, so it's obviously a nuance that you've put in. So is that nuance going to be obvious to a casual observer, or I mean, what I'm saying is how's that really going to be?
Sure, we would try not to make it obvious to a casual observer. Like you said, shortening something, making one leg a little longer than the other, making one cutter a little wider in a section, putting a little radius on it, something like that, just so it wouldn't be obvious. You would look at the logo and think, oh, that's their standard logo.
Right. Yeah, we participate, of course, in confidential arrangements, so that those design decisions that we recommend in order to provide that defense, right, are only known between us and our customer. And then we provide in our standard manufacturing process, there's different techniques for adding these features. Sometimes it can be a change of our process, where we might use a classical hobbing technique where you're coining operation in a punch, or it might be some kind of EDM process. And so we can recommend maybe a slight nuance that's not apparent to the casual observer, but it's distinctual to those who know. And it's a combination of design as well as manufacturing process.
So this is stuff that you don't use a conventional hobbing approach for, or this is EDM? Or?
You could use a standard approach unless there was the detail would be too much for the hobbing process, and you would, as Scott mentioned, EDM, electric discharge machining. It's another burning process. That would be more on the exotic shapes too. If the radii on the outside edges, internal radii are too small, then you'd have to go to this process. So if you're making a very unique tablet with indentations, then you would have to go to something else.
All right, let's just change gears here for a minute. I mean, one of the things, believe it or not, we get called in with a lot of our clients is their ability to demonstrate that their divisible tablet is in fact divisible. So I had a couple of questions. I mean, the day if I put the bisect on there because it looks cool is over. So the question really comes down is how functional is it? I get a sense that people still don't ask the question. So do people involve you early on? What's that look like?
That is becoming more and more apparent as FDA regulations are getting stricter about the breakability, the functionality of a bisect. So yes, they try to include us early on, especially if it's an existing product that now they're trying to divide it in half. Maybe they had a bisect before that wasn't quite doing the job, or it was doing the job too quickly. It was too deep. We go through that as well. It's not, the friability is not there when they go to coat it. It's breaking in the coating pan. So we would go back and look at that and try to make a functional bisect that would allow, indeed, many times the bisect has to be included with embossing as well, so you can't take up too much space. So you look at it that way.
Scott, were you guys involved at all when they came out with the divisibility guidance and the splitting tablets, or were you approached?
Only in a limited fashion.
Okay.
Right. Not to a great length, but it didn't take long, right, for that guidance and those discussions, right, to reach not only a certain ring of customers as well as ourselves. And so together, there's a little bit of learning happening, right? I can't say that the guidance, as I understand it, and I'm not the expert, but it's not all 100% clear at the beginning.
No, it was, it kind of read like it was written in abstentia by people.
Right,
that's okay.
Right. But it is a meaningful conversation, and we're able to, basically give design recommendations, for the functional bisects, to maintain the integrity of both pieces or even three pieces. And improve the chances that our customers are going to, meet the trials that they do in order to, to demonstrate conformance, right, to those mandates.
Yeah, just on that note, I mean, one of the things we've seen, I mean, to the levels that it's brought now, actually, what they expect to see is friability after it's broken, whereas it should still meet the preliminary friability requirements after it's after it's split, which, as a and I got some of my one of my ex-graduate school colleagues here, I can tell you, post compression and you break something, the physics are totally different. So I'm not really following where that went, but I digress. Anyway, so while we're on that, so what about, is there regulatory implications? Let's say tomorrow I come in, I want to put a raised V with an eagle on it on my tablet here, so what do you tell them? I mean, obviously you can design. Do you provide some other guidance on that, Scott? I mean, what do you tell them?
Right, and do you feel in the area of the braking and the?
Oh no, let's. I think we beat that one to death.
Okay.
Let's move on. So
right.
yeah, we're talking about changing the design.
Sure.
All right.
Well, I mean, we can be as clever as they like, right, as far as how exotic or what their aspirations are. But many times it becomes a limitation in the ability to produce the tablet in a reliable volume manner. So it's the engineering team enjoys the challenge, but there are limitations to the perspectives and as Stacie said, the thickness versus the cup height and bandwidth.
Yeah.
We have to oftentimes, we often have to disappoint our customers because we give them some boundary conditions that they don't want to accept, very simply.
We will get a business card. We'll receive a business card, say, with a logo on it, and they want that on their tablet. And many times, things are too small. We know that it's going to pick, it's going to stick. So we have to try to reduce that problem before it even starts, and create a design that is not only pleasing to their marketing, but also functional so that they're not going to have these problems later on, and also that we can manufacture as well. The hobbing process is a cold forming process, pushing the hardened steel hob into a punch. That has to release as well. So you have to have good flow of the material that you're pressing into to then get them good distinction on their tablet afterward. So it's a process, as Scott said, we do work closely with them and they may want this, and we say, we would rather do this, and we try to come up with a compromise in between.
Right, and I think the other thing that they seem to forget is in our business, everybody checks everything you do, so it's regulatory. So sure. The question really comes back to is, a lot of times they're faced with proving that it is the same as it was. In other words, the dissolution is the same, the disintegration is the same. Granted, some of the physical characteristics are going to change a bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, hardness is definitely going to change. It's dependent. So, I mean, do they involve you in any of that kind of discussion, or whatever happens there, Scott?
Yeah, they do, but often too late. Right. That's the struggle.
So they involve you after it wasn't successful? Is that?
Correct. Yeah. No. Sadly, that is true.
So it's your fault, huh?
It becomes more of a problem-solving exercise rather than a brand development exercise.
Correct.
So that's often the case. Is that we know that we can help, but it's a bit late. But we're working to improve that engagement earlier.
So I think in a lot of cases, what I'm hearing is, geez, I should have came to you sooner, but obviously your design is the reason it failed, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, I got that part. All right, so let's just talk about extended release for a minute.
Okay.
So they come to you, they want to do, now extended release is like talking about the United States. I mean, there's 50 states. Extended release, it could be any one of 7 different technologies. So Stacie, you're the contact person. So how do you do the triage? So you give them the direction they need, or what kind of questions you ask?
We try to decide how thick, say, if you're doing a multi-layer tablet, as part of that, how thick their layers are, what is their upper punch penetration, things of that nature is what would be asked by the engineering department or myself to give to the engineering department. So we would try to design around that as well, making sure that the tooling that we manufacture also is appropriate for that type of a project, keeping things sharper so there's no product transfer layer to layer, so you're not getting the blending that way. As far as something unique, whether we do say a core tablet, exposed core, so we're going to design something, say, like a clover leaf, where the sides, that core inside is now exposed, so that you get the release from the outside and then the inside as well. So we do try to work with unique designs that way to give them those type of releases.
I think, and that what they do is essentially what they're trying to do is, is that a press coated tablet you're talking about with the exposed core, right?
That would be a press coated tablet.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Some of the others will have a functional coating where there's product in the coating as well, and obviously we're not doing that end of it. So we
Right.
want to make sure at that point that the tablet would be acceptable to be coated. Again, the friability, the rolling, if it's going to be printed afterward, to make sure that it is functional for that type of an application as well.
On combination products, on fixed combinations, a lot of people go, sometimes the commingling just doesn't work. I mean, that's why we go with layered products, to obviate clearly physical compatibilities, and I've seen it where there are pharmacokinetic incompatibilities, where co-administration, at least like that, create other problems. So how far, and what I think is a lot of times they don't think through everything. A lot of times combination products try to use existing products and existing granulations and formulations, which mean the concentration per unit of dose is the same. And they try to marry these up in a disproportionate manner where you get minuscule layer and a huge layer, and they expect it to run like a dream. So what kind of guides? I imagine you gotta, what do you do in that? Do you kind of have them talk to equipment guys, or what do you do?
Yes, we have to bring in that equipment part to the equation because there are certain limitations and setup of say the tablet press, especially for layer drugs. And if you want an extremely thin layer, does it necessarily have to be the first layer, or the second layer, or the third layer, for example? A bit of what Stacie was mentioning earlier, the specifications for the tooling in order to accommodate and have clean separation between layers is another nuance that has to be considered between the tooling by itself and the later for the press. So yes, the conversation has to necessarily grow, right, to allow for that those considerations. Okay.
So we get all this fancy stuff going, right? I mean, this is the part that I love. So they go in and they put an embossing on the tablet of the president's profile, okay? And then they complain that the tooling life isn't there. So when does that part of the conversation come in?
Usually, yeah, that definitely is. You certainly want the tablets or the tooling to last forever, basically.
Oh.
As far as that, a lot of that can be determined on the embossing section, how they polish it, how they take care of it afterward as well. We try to encourage them and instruct them how to maintain their tooling afterward, especially if there's a lot of detail on there. As far as those larger tablets, as products get combined, many times the tablets are getting larger, cups are getting deeper, less land. So we try to design them so that they have the correct force, that they will accept the correct force. We will talk to the customers about that as well, because using too excessive a force on a tool can certainly cause breakage and damage to that tool as well. So as we're designing the tablets, We also ask roughly, if this is an existing product, maybe you've had some experience with that, is it tough to compress, is it easy to compress? And we try to work through that as well, to give them as much tool life as possible.
Scott, this is something we talked about. There was a time where some of the associations, well, I think Stacie, you're probably young enough to remember it too. There was a book on standards that we put together, IPT standards.
Sure.
The industrial pharmaceutical technology.
Right.
That goes back about 300 years. But anyway, where does, is there a compilation, because that used to contain maintenance,
Still does.
minimum design. So have you guys
Right.
maintained these sorts of data?
Right,
And this is
the
available?
tableting specification manual, they're still on their 7th edition, but that's the rules we go by as well. But that they still are in their 7th edition. That what you were talking about, the IPT, when I first started, there was one sheet.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically. And I still have a copy of that sheet too, just to remind where we came from. But yes, the TSM has gone through and they meet periodically, and I would assume they're due to meet again. But that is kind of the Bible, so to speak, of the
Exactly.
tableting industry. And it
and
does
you-
contain all that
And
information.
you guys are still engaged in that dialogue, Scott?
Yes.
We are, and it still lives to this day, right? It's a very useful resource, so, yeah.
It is, but I find a lot of people don't seem to refer to it, though. I mean, especially in a case where you wind up with some land being a knife edge and the guy complains that I ran one batch and my edge is gone.
Right.
So,
Sure.
so are there impacts to tablet press setup? I mean, that's the other thing I find with people. I mean, how involved do you have to get? I mean, obviously not everybody's going to be a large pharma company. So if you're going to, what do? Do you work through this with them? Do you take ownership of the setup? Is that the equipment guy? Who is it?
That's basically the equipment guy. That's someone in their own tableting area that needs to be trained properly to do that. We will train people. We have different divisions in our company that do go out and work with operators to show them proper training. Normally they get trained in-house themselves, but if they're having a problem with some tooling, they have some damage on the tooling, we would ask for the tooling to be returned to us to look at it and look at the witness marks that we see. You can certainly many times see especially a lower punch, that there is a stress line that it was just, you can tell it was from hitting as opposed to something that happened during running. So those are things we try to go over with the operators and can we fix the damage that they have? First off is usually their question, but try to determine why that damage was there and instruct them otherwise so they won't do it again, basically.
Right, and if I can add, Russ, while the customer certainly is responsible for the setup of their own equipment, and we're interfacing and touching many varieties of equipment, right, as we provide tooling. We certainly try to at least guide the design and aid them in the robustness of the use of that tooling. Certainly by, you've got certain standards with key angles and the way that you install tooling to a given press. But if you have, in a specific case of shaped tablets, right, and bisects, and if there are certain weak points, we try to help plan for that tablet takeoff area, ejection forces. We try to plan for the clearance between die and punch tips, and the ability for, as we were discussing a moment ago, the multi-layer tablets. We do try to allow for the proper sort of air interactions between the dissipation of air out of the die as you're compressing successive layers. So all of these nice, interesting conversations, right, we offer as much as the customer can endure. And then we try to guide them in that pre-planning.
We have gone as far, if I might add as well, we've gone as far as putting a laser etch down on the bottom of say on the lower punch. This particular customer had a pentagon shape. So they wanted to make sure that they put it in a certain way. They didn't have the ability to key a lower punch. Their press didn't accept the key. So we put a mark on it so that the operator could precisely put that in there so that they would match all the time. So those are things we will work with the customer if they have an issue of that as well for setup.
Unkeyed shape punch.
On the lower, the
Oh,
lower
okay.
does not have to, on it, yes,
Yeah.
they weren't able to key it.
Got you.
Some presses we do. A customer will ask us to key a lower punch, a shape. The only reason truly to do that, unless it's having a twisting issue, which is causing damage to the punch, would be for orientation of the embossing. Customers many times want that so that their operators don't have a decision to make. They can only put them in one way, but this particular one did not, it wasn't, their press wouldn't accept a keyed lower. So we put this orientation mark on there so that they were able to do the same thing.
On that note, too, I find that a lot of these companies decide to outsource their manufacturing, right? So I've been making this product, now I'm going to give it to company X. The first thing, you know, one of the things that people forget, after I send them my set of tools that I was using, they got to buy tools. So how do you get, you know, do you get involved in that sort of stuff? It's a little tough because, I mean, where is your reach? Regionally? I mean, how do you do it?
Yeah, well, we actually reach globally, and we can support that migration of product manufacturing. And as you allude, you know, the advent and the increase of contract manufacturing is here, right? It's no longer you know, a novel idea, I guess. But we certainly are interested. You know, we support innovators and customers who are virtual manufacturers, and they tell us in the beginning that we may be producing at 1 or 2 or 3 different locations. So once we understand that, we do then try to understand the variety of equipment that they'll be engaged. Sometimes it's the same, many times not. And you know, it sort of starts back at the fundamental, when we make a set of tooling for that innovative product, you know, if we talk about the coining process and making a hob, in a way, that's our master, right? This is the master that puts the impression of the tablet into the tool steel. So we naturally safeguard those masters, you know, like the jewels that they are. But then now you go a step further, and we have tooling that's inside a press, and indeed that becomes now the master for every tablet that comes off that press, right? And hopefully it's millions or billions, right? But we can ensure that integrity through not only our reproducibility of the tooling by itself, but then second, you know, as we were somewhat discussing, the ability to then translate that tooling or that product to different presses, and it might be even different sizes. Like we might have what we call a B-size turret or a D-size turret or others. And so we help then translate, you know, what is that tablet being made on press A, B-size, to another press D-size through suggesting changes in maybe some speeds or tonnage. We can change things in the head design of the tool to increase or decrease dwell time. So there are a lot of opportunities to help ensure that, you know, that transparent manufacturing.
So while we're talking about the global point, and I think this is a good place to start to bring it around the closure here. Just as a curiosity, how much of your business now is in multi-tip tools? Is there quite a bit, Stacie?
It is becoming more and more. Percentage-wise, I don't know that we've done any studies on it. 30%, 40%, 30% probably,
Yeah,
I would
most.
say,
Yeah.
at the most.
Yes.
It hasn't gone beyond that, it's more, but it is becoming more and more popular for various reasons. Capital expenditure, you may be able to double your production without buying another press. So that is one reason to do the multi-tips. Sometimes it is the way the dosage is, the 2mm tablets, 1.8mm tablets. They tend many times to work better to compress them with 10, 20 on a tool as opposed to trying to do 1 2mm tablet per station. So those are different reasons for that. But we're seeing a lot more of that.
Right. Yeah, I think it's part of the cost equation, right? Not only the capital investment that Stacie mentions, but just very functionally the scaling the manufacturing it's an option to the customers to scale. And you hear about these small micro tablets and different delivery mechanisms, you know, as you mentioned, in a capsule. So it is an active trend. Yeah.
No, certainly that's one of the things, but I'm surprised it was even up as far as 30%.
And that's a guesstimation,
Yeah.
but I based on the quotes that I do, it seems even more recently that they're coming in.
But it makes a lot of sense, like
More and more.
mini tabs and being loaded into capsules, yeah.
Right, it's a combination of both of those, where we have, say, classical, larger tablet diameters that are simply being, increased in volume. But then that's one, I think, area of growth that we've seen. But then the second is the advent of these a different form, right? This micro tablets in a capsule. This is a more recent delivery mechanism that's adding to that the sales and the discussions for multi-tips.
Well, I want to thank you too, Scott and Stacie. Want to appreciate the conversation we had, and I think tooling is always a basic aspect. It's one of the basic go-to technologies that we always use for us, and it's good to know that some of the icons are still out there doing it and grinding away. So that takes care of this section of Interflex Live. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Russ.